Let's be clear, Ukraine would not exist as a country today without US support. Mark Rutte made this statement during his first press conference as incoming NATO Secretary-General on October 1, 2024, and the former Dutch Prime Minister certainly has a point. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the US has provided at least $80 billion in military and other aid to Ukraine, with the latest package worth $8 billion announced during Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's trip to New York in late September 2024. This aid, including everything from ammunition to M1 Abrams tanks and advanced missile systems like HIMARS and ATACMS, has not only undoubtedly enabled Ukraine to mount a stubborn, effective resistance, but to strike back. Of course, the US is far from the only nation to have provided sovereignty-preserving military aid to Ukraine, and it's one of NATO's smaller members, the Netherlands, that has just delivered arguably one of the most devastating blows to the Russian war effort to date. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not impressed, to say the least. So what exactly has the Netherlands done? Why could this mark a turning point in the war, and why is Putin so upset? All will be revealed in the video, but first, why is the Netherlands such a staunch supporter of Ukraine and an equally staunch opponent of Russia? This certainly wasn't always the case. As recently as 2016, Dutch citizens voted in a referendum against ratifying the EU's association agreement with Ukraine. However, research has shown that this against vote had very little to do with the feelings of the Dutch towards Ukraine itself. Some were concerned about a possible influx of cheap Ukrainian workers disrupting the local labor market, but their concerns were much more a reflection of dissatisfaction with the Dutch government at the time, led for 11 years until 2024 by the aforementioned Rutte. Dissatisfaction with what they perceived as increasing overreach by Brussels and resistance to European integration and EU expansion in general were also key factors in the vote. Many, particularly from the extreme right and left parties, were also concerned about provoking Putin, who had objected strongly to the idea of Ukraine joining the EU since the idea was first floated. Russia's invasion of Ukraine certainly shook things up in terms of Dutch sentiment toward both Ukraine and Putin. In research published by Bruegel in July 2023, 53% of Dutch citizens supported sanctions against Russia, even if this meant a higher cost of living for themselves. Only around a third felt that the most important thing was to reach a peace deal as quickly as possible, even if that meant Ukraine having to surrender some or all of the territories annexed by Russia in the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Crimea. And in a January 2024 survey by Dutch newspaper RTL News, although 62% of those surveyed expressed worry that Russia might attack the Netherlands, their main concern seemed to be getting prepared, not backing down from Ukrainian support to appease Putin. Is this a case of Dutch courage? After all, Russia dwarfs the Netherlands in terms of size, spending power, population, and military strength, and on May 28, 2024, Putin directly threatened the Netherlands and other smaller European nations like the Baltic states over their provision of increasingly lethal military aid to Ukraine. In Europe, especially in small countries, they should realize what they're playing with. They should remember that they are countries with small, densely populated territories, he said. And he's not the only Russian politician to issue threats. On June 5, 2024, Alexei Zaravlyov, a member of the State Duma, Russia's lowest house of parliament, directly threatened the Netherlands on primetime Russian TV. If NATO threatens our country, then we will target countries that provide NATO with the infrastructure. The Netherlands, where the NATO facilities are located, will be among the primary targets, he said, adding, "This is called a nice target in the military, and this is a matter of one day with minimal consumption of nuclear ammunition." It's fair to say that to date all such Russian threats have been more or less bluster. However, were Russia to follow through on them, it wouldn't be the first time Russian forces attacked the Netherlands. Back in 1799, during the War of the Second Coalition, an expeditionary force of British and Russian troops invaded the North Holland Peninsula in the Batavian Republic. In some respects, this invasion, which ended with Anglo-Russian withdrawal, shares some striking similarities to Russia's invasion of Ukraine today. Although the Russian forces were more or less hired by the British, their organization, discipline, and performance in the field left somewhat to be desired, contributing to the eventual retreat of the British. The British were actually led at the time by the exiled Dutch Prince William of Orange, who was expecting the Dutch to welcome his invasion with open arms. Instead, to his dismay, he encountered stiff resistance and innovative tactics, such as flooding the canals, which forced the Anglo-Russian forces to retreat. Putin made exactly the same mistake in the early days of the current war. The Russians advanced on Kyiv, expecting the local population to be standing by the side of the highway waving Russian flags, as when Hitler rolled into Vienna 75 years earlier. Instead, he was welcomed with dogged resistance and innovative urban warfare, forcing his 40-mile-long convoy of armored vehicles to turn tail from outside Kyiv and head hastily back to the Donbass. However, besides this incident, known as the Anglo-Russian invasion of Holland, Russian-Dutch relations had for the most part been excellent, from Tsar Peter the Great's initial visits to the Netherlands in the 17th century until the onset of the Soviet Union. In fact, Dutch shipbuilders, brought back to Russia by Peter, more or less built the early Russian navy, and in the early 1800s, the Russians and Dutch fought together in the alliance against Napoleon. In more recent times, although Russian-Dutch relations have soured considerably over the past decade, they had been pretty healthy after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990. In 2011, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev met with Prime Minister Rutte in the Kremlin to discuss bilateral ties. Dutchmen Guus Hiddink and Dick Advocaat managed the Russian football team from 2006 to 12, and at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, Putin and Dutch King Willem-Alexander clinked glasses and enjoyed a round of fine Dutch ale at the Holland Heineken beer house. In fact, 2013 was designated the Year of Russia in the Netherlands. It was supposed to be a celebration of 400 years of bilateral relations, and Putin actually visited Amsterdam on a state visit. But by the end of the year, relations had taken a significant turn for the worse. The trouble started when Russia arrested Greenpeace protesters aboard a Dutch-registered vessel in the Arctic, leading to a diplomatic spat. The arrest of Russian Embassy Minister Councillor Dmitry Borodin on charges of abusing his children followed a week later by Dutch diplomat Onno Elderenbosch being physically attacked in his apartment in Moscow, only worsened the mood. The spat upgraded from a diplomatic row to an economic one in March 2014, when the Netherlands participated in EU sanctions against Russia for its role in the civil war in Ukraine. Russia retaliated in August of that year with agricultural sanctions against the EU, including the Netherlands, who produce almost a quarter of the world's agricultural output. But it was the downing of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 over the Donbass in July 2014 that caused relations to reach their lowest point in centuries. A total of 193 Dutch nationals lost their lives on that plane. The Dutch blamed Russia, a claim that Russia has vehemently denied. But in any event, the net result was that by the time the Russian invasion of February 22 rolled around, and the Western world began imposing sanctions on Russia and supplying aid to Ukraine, it was a safe bet that the Netherlands would be one of the first to join in. And just as safe a bet that the Netherlands would be one of the first names on Russia's list of unfriendly nations too. In terms of support for Ukraine, the Dutch have certainly put their money where their mouth is, over $7.25 billion already, with another $4 billion committed until the end of 2026. So what kind of support has the Netherlands provided, and why is the latest round so important? We'll answer that second, juicy part of the question shortly. But first, let's unpack the aid that the Dutch have provided already, going from the least lethal to the most. The biggest, most powerful weapons deservedly get the headlines, but there's much more to waging war than that. And in the case of the Netherlands, it's really quite staggering to see just how comprehensive their assistance has been. As of June 5, 2024, the Netherlands has officially supplied a veritable mountain of clothing, helmets, shrapnel vests, rations and medical supplies, including personal first aid kits and medicines, over 10,000 tents, 4,400 computer and data systems, 33 field hospitals, and 31 mobile field kitchens have also been supplied. To assist with logistics and engineering, they provided 25 cranes, 21 trucks with side loadings, 20 mechanical shovels, 29 forklift side loader combinations, 6 flat track cranes, 22 trailers, and 6,600 field reinforcements. With so much of the front line spanning rivers, estuaries, and wetlands, both the Ukrainians and Russians have regularly targeted bridges to disrupt enemy logistics. So the 37 Bailey bridges, 6 M3 pontoon systems, and 5 Leopard 1 bridge-laying tanks, with bridges supplied by the Netherlands, have undoubtedly come in extremely handy for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or AFU. So of the assortment of 1,320 vehicles comprising 4-ton trucks, tractor-trailer combinations, Amarak vehicles, ambulances, fuel transport trucks, MB all-terrain vehicles, motorcycles and quads, state-of-the-art demining equipment has also been generously provided, including 1 Scanjack mine clearance rig, 3 Bozina mine clearance rigs, 9 mine plows, 6 mine rollers for BMP infantry combat vehicles, 2 Alkmaar-class naval mine hunters, plus a variety of mine detectors, mine picks, and EOD equipment. In terms of sensors and sensing devices, 557 assorted drones, 4 Vera-NG passive radar systems, plus ground sensors and night vision equipment, including brightness intensifiers and thermal imagers, have been delivered to the AFU. Moving on to firepower, individual weapons provided include MAG, Mini-Me, and 50 caliber machine guns, long and medium-range rifles such as the HK416 and pistols. For fire support, 8 PZH-2000 armored howitzers, and an undisclosed quantity of M109 howitzers and 120mm mortars have been supplied. Needless to say, weapons are much more effective when they're loaded with ammunition. Copious amounts have been provided, including various types of small-caliber ammunition for individual weapons, heavy ammunition for combat vehicles, tank and helicopter gun systems, anti-tank ammunition such as Law and Panzerfaust, 155mm artillery ammunition, plus rifle grenades, non-lethal hand grenades, and other explosives. Speaking of combat vehicles and tanks, these deliveries have been among the most high-profile, telling, and infuriating for Putin. He probably wasn't too concerned about the arrival of the Fennec reconnaissance vehicles and Viking tracked vehicles, but no doubt the arrival of 60 T-72 tanks and more recently 269 YPR armored tracked vehicles pleased him less. However, the cherry on top was surely the arrival of at least 100 Leopard 1 and 14 Leopard 2A4 tanks, jointly supplied by Germany and Denmark. These vehicles and tanks have undoubtedly made a difference on the battlefield, allowing the AFU to wage a protracted land-based war of attrition against a larger force for far longer than Putin was expecting. But it's in the air that the Dutch military support for Ukraine has had the most profound effect, going a long way to neutralize Russia's superiority in that theater of the war. In terms of air defense, the Dutch have supplied 2 Patriot launchers along with Patriot air defense missiles, 100 MR2 mobile anti-aircraft guns, 20 Bofors 40L70 40mm anti-aircraft guns, 4 Vera NG systems, and assorted missiles and missile systems for air defense and drone control such as the Stinger. Under the category of air offense, we arrive at the most important, controversial, and possibly game-changing military aid yet: 42 F-16 fighter aircraft. F-16s can fly up to twice the speed of sound and have a maximum range of more than 2,000 miles. They can also fire modern weapons used by NATO countries, a critical point, as we'll see shortly. Of the 42 F-16s supplied by the Netherlands, 24 are destined for Ukraine for military use, with the remaining 18 going to Romania, where they'll be used to train Ukrainian pilots. On September 28, 2024, footage of 4 F-16 fighters leaving the Netherlands bound for Ukraine started appearing online. Although it's unknown exactly how many of the F-16s promised to Ukraine by the Dutch have already been delivered, these latest additions join at least another 6 that are known to have been delivered in early August 2024. Although Zelensky has stated that he needs at least 300 F-16s to mount a truly effective air defense and offense against Russia, these latest deliveries are undoubtedly a major boost for Ukraine. With a bit of luck, they'll last a bit longer than the first confirmed loss, which crashed on August 26, 2024. The reasons for the crash are still unclear, with a Defense Ministry inquiry underway. A heavy Russian aerial attack involving 5 missiles and 74 Shahid drones was underway at the time of the crash, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. But there were also reports that it was shot down by friendly fire from a Patriot missile. On September 26, 2024, Russian military channels reported that a Russian hypersonic Kinzhal missile strike had destroyed 4 F-16s on the ground at Strakon-Stantinov airfield in western Ukraine. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation immediately denied it. Russian sources, including propagandist Anatoly Shary, are spreading information about the supposed loss of 4 F-16 fighter jets during today's unexpected missile strike. This information is presented without any evidence or concrete facts. Such reports are yet another fake designed to manipulate public opinion, fabricated to push the narrative of the ineffectiveness of Western aircraft, their statement on Telegram read, without providing any evidence or concrete facts themselves. Such is the fog of war. But assuming that Ukraine still has the full quota of either 9 or 23 F-16s at its disposal, how can these few planes make a difference in the war? They're 45 years old after all, and in truth have been decommissioned and mothballed by the Dutch, who are in the process of upgrading to the state-of-the-art F-35. The answer in a nutshell: long-range strikes deep inside Russia. Ukraine's strikes inside Russia are becoming much more frequent, much more destructive, and are already a serious thorn in Putin's side. The Russian Defense Ministry issues daily reports of the shooting down of dozens, if not hundreds, of Ukrainian drones and missiles inside Russia, particularly in and around the city of Belgorod. But increasing numbers are getting through, and the damage and casualties are rising. Since the beginning of September 2024, there have been 6 major incidents. On September 1st, Ukraine launched over 100 drones against targets including the Konakovo power station in Konakovo, Tver Oblast, and the Moscow refinery in Moscow. Then on September 10th, Ukraine launched 144 drones against Moscow, the largest drone attack against Russia in the war. Russian authorities reported dozens of homes being damaged and 2 people killed by the attack, but the Ukrainians were just getting started. On September 18th, Ukraine launched a successful drone attack on the main Missile and Artillery Directorate, or GRAU, 107th Ammunition Depot in Toropets, causing a massive series of explosions and fires while damaging much of the town. NASA firm's satellites detected the resulting fires over an area of approximately 5 square miles, with the blast wave spread up to 200 miles. Russian officials reported that 13 people had been injured and that an evacuation of the area had been ordered, with the Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center estimating that the strike had caused 30,000 tons of munitions to explode. Then on the night of September 20th to 21st, 2024, Ukraine launched drone attacks on 2 Russian ammunition depots, the Grau 23rd Arsenal near the village of Oktyabrski in Tver Oblast and the 719th Artillery Ammunition Base near Tioretsk in Krasnodar Krai. Although fires and some damage were reported, the Russians claim the drones were all shot down and the damages and fires were caused by falling debris. Whether that's true or not, for the Russians, October certainly started with a bang, October 3rd particularly. In the early hours, Ukrainian drones struck the Borysoglebsk Air Base in the Voronezh Oblast, about 185 miles from Ukraine's Kharkiv Oblast, targeting Su-34s and Su-35 jets, fuel tanks, and a warehouse for Russian glide bombs. While the extent of the damage is not yet clear, the NASA firm's satellite monitoring system detected several fire hotspots on the premises of the facility, supporting claims of a successful attack. Then, during the day, Russian sources reported the downing of 4 Ukrainian missiles attempting to attack the Kursk nuclear power plant, or NPP. The missiles were reportedly shot down just 3 miles from the NPP itself, causing a fire in the town of Kurchatov. This is not the first time the Russians have narrowly avoided direct Ukrainian hits on the Kursk NPP, and frankly, one has to question the sanity of attacking a nuclear power plant so close to Ukraine's borders. As Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova pointed out in late September, radiation doesn't stop at borders. Radiation doesn't need a visa. Or maybe the Ukrainians have forgotten what happened at Chernobyl. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, just 60 miles from Kyiv, was Ukraine's first NPP, but is no longer operational. Ukraine still has 3 fully operational NPPs, however, with 15 nuclear reactors between them. They are the 3 gigawatt or GW South Ukraine nuclear power plant located in Yuzhno-Ukrainsk, the 3 GW Rivne nuclear power plant in Rivne, and the 2 GW Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant in Natishin. Technically, the 6 GW Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, located in Energodar, is the 4th Ukrainian NPP, but it's been under Russian control since 2022 and regularly shelled by Ukraine too, if the Russians and staff are to be believed. These NPPs are critical for Ukraine's energy supply, particularly since Russia has been mercilessly hammering Ukraine's thermal power infrastructure for almost 2 years, starting as retaliation for Ukraine's successful attack on the Kerch Bridge in Crimea. These attacks, according to the Ukrainian authorities, have decimated 80% of Ukraine's power supply, leaving millions of people at risk of severe power cuts this coming winter. But so far, Russia has strictly avoided targeting the NPPs. Why would Ukraine risk provoking Russia into striking their NPPs by repeatedly trying to strike theirs? For sure, up until now, Putin has seemingly allowed Ukraine to step over one supposed red line after another, without any of the nuclear or other highly destructive retaliation he keeps threatening. But there's a very big difference between striking a nuclear reactor and striking an ammo depot or an airfield. However costly the damage inflicted on the targets Ukraine has been hitting might be, it doesn't have a half-life of thousands of highly radioactive years. Perhaps this is why, besides the Netherlands and Denmark, none of the nations that are supplying military aid to Ukraine have given permission to use their weapons to strike deep into Russia, yet. Maybe they simply don't trust Ukraine not to do something that might have devastating consequences for themselves. In late September, Putin responded to growing provocation and subsequent ridicule about his failure to follow through with major escalation in response to each red line being nonchalantly stepped over by Ukraine. He ordered Russia's nuclear doctrine to be updated. In a nutshell, the update means that if Russia is attacked, even with missiles that contain conventional weapons but are able to contain nuclear warheads, Russia could respond with a nuclear attack, and not just against the country firing the missile, but against the countries that supplied and facilitated it too. Perhaps he's bluffing again, or perhaps it's just a matter of time until the red haze comes over him and he reaches for the big red button. Certainly, subsequent public statements from the US and the UK expressing hesitation about allowing Ukraine to strike deeper within Russia using its weapons suggest that, at least publicly, they've taken him seriously. Or perhaps the reticence to give permission is more a question of domestic politics. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has been adamant about not allowing the use of Taurus missiles supplied to Ukraine for strikes inside Russia. His party, the Social Democratic Party or SPD, is losing ground rapidly to both the right-wing Alternative for Germany, locally known as the AfD, and left-wing Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance. Reason and Justice, both of whom strongly oppose further military aid to Ukraine. He doesn't want to risk pushing more voters into their hands. French politics is a bit of a circus at the moment, to put it mildly. A wide coalition of left and extreme left-leaning parties colluded in the second round of general elections to keep out the far right, who had won the first round. President Emmanuel Macron now seems to have colluded with the right, but not the far right, to diminish the power of the victorious left in the new cabinet. The left is furious, as are the far right. It's a political powder keg, which could easily be ignited as a result of France being dragged into direct involvement in Ukraine, or worse, subject to attack by Russia. According to the Russians, fragments of the downed missiles in the October 3rd attack on the Kursk MPP indicate they were French-supplied scalps, and scalp missiles are capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. France has 58 nuclear reactors at 18 sites, almost all of which are within the 1,865-mile range of the Kh-47M2 Kinzhal. The UK's political situation is only marginally more stable than that in France. Sir Keir Starmer, their fourth prime minister in as many years, is grappling with right-wing anti-immigration riots, discord within his own party over military support for Israel, and increasing discontent over the ever-rising cost of living. Both he and his Defense Secretary David Lammy have spoken aggressively in favor of Ukraine, with Lammy likening Putin to a slave owner trying to turn a mafia state into a mafia empire, in a fiery speech at the UN on September 25, 2024. But besides the French scalps, the British Storm Shadows are the only other missile provided to Ukraine so far that's capable of holding a nuclear warhead. The Storm Shadow is a precision-guided, air-launched cruise missile with a range of over 185 miles, costing around $1 million a pop. It uses INS, GPS, and terrain reference navigation, making it capable of attacking hardened or buried targets. And Ukraine has been using Storm Shadows prodigiously to attack Russian targets since deliveries started arriving in 2023. In particular, Storm Shadows have been used to target Russian naval assets such as the Rostov-on-Don submarine and Minsk landing ship in Sevastopol. With the recent polarizing US election, the last thing the US needs is a major escalation of the war its ally is already embroiled in. They already have Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's belligerence to deal with. And hot wars and elections are generally not a good mix at the best of times, unless you're Putin if the most recent Russian election results are anything to go by. Republican President-elect Donald Trump has made it clear that his approach to the Ukraine war will not be the same as the kind of support that the Biden administration has delivered. With Kamala Harris out of the picture, Israel can certainly count on Trump's support, but what the US does in regards to Ukraine remains to be seen. Compared to all of the above, the political situation in both the Netherlands and Denmark is decidedly sane and stable. Perhaps that's part of the reason these nations have been the first to unequivocally grant permission to Ukraine to use their weapons to strike as deep inside Russia as Ukraine deems necessary. The Danes had already granted permission for Ukraine to use the 19 F-16s they are supplying for strikes inside Russia back in May. In August, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen went even further. Defending yourself may well include invading the aggressor's territory. If, as part of this, you attack the infrastructure or military facilities of the attacking party, this is fully in line with the rules of war, he said. And on September 24, 2024, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen urged others to follow their example. Let's end the discussion about red lines. Let's not delay what Ukrainians need to push Russia back. So far, only the Dutch have heeded the call and joined the Danes in supplying their F-16s. That gives Ukraine the capability to fire long-range missiles deep into Russia. As mentioned earlier, the F-16 supplied to Ukraine have been outfitted with the ability to fire modern, long-range, high-impact weapons. Ukraine now has the F-16s, but they'll still need the missiles. To that end, on top of all the other assistance detailed earlier in the video, on July 10, 2024, the Netherlands announced that it had allocated an additional €300 million, around $325 million, to purchase munitions for the F-16. As ground-based missiles, neither the ATACMS nor HIMARS missiles supplied in large quantities by the US can be fired from an F-16. So what long-range munitions capable of striking deep into Russia could those funds procure? The lowest hanging fruit in terms of availability and suitability would be the US-made AIM-120 family, which can carry a 44-pound warhead. The variant with the longest range is the AIM-120D, but at 86 to 97 miles, it's barely going to reach Kursk, let alone deep into Russia. While these missiles might well prove invaluable for use in defensive situations, shooting down Russian missiles and drones from way behind the front lines, in an offensive sense, they're a waste of money. Russia's reaction to Ukraine's successful drone attacks in the Russian oblasts bordering Ukraine has been to move attack aircraft and other expensive assets further back into the heartland, beyond the range of Storm Shadows, scalps, and attack drones. What Ukraine really needs is a warehouse full of AGM-158 JASSMs. These air-launched US-made cruise missiles pack a 1,000-pound warhead that can be fired with an accuracy of within 10 feet. More importantly, their range is from 230 to 575 miles, depending on the model, and Moscow is only 280 miles from the border. At around $1 million each, that Dutch F-16 ammunition fund could procure the necessary warehouse full, provided that is, that the US is willing and able to part with them. Only somewhere between 2,000 and 7,200 units have ever been produced, with Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, only able to produce 500 to 1,000 units annually. Thus far, the US has been unwilling to include JASSMs in any military aid package. To be fair, before the confirmed delivery of the Dutch and Danish F-16s, it made little sense. That's because their incompatibility with what remains of the Ukrainian Air Force's ex-Soviet jets means there will be nothing to fire them from. Now, those JASSMs could turn out to be the game changer, and with the US distracted by controversies surrounding the recent election, chaos in the Middle East, his Kursk invasion having stalled, and the Eastern Front collapsing, Zelensky and the AFU could certainly use a game changer about now. But whatever happens next, history suggests the Netherlands will always be in Ukraine's corner. Do you think the US will give Ukraine JASSMs? If they do, what targets do you think would cause the most damage to Russia? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. Now go and check out Spain has had enough of Russia. Get out of Ukraine. Or click this other video instead.